Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Sleep and Dream Tea from a company called, I believe, Tecan. It's a European of some kind, and I've had it a while, so I think it's just time to finish what I have of it. But it is a good tea. It's a relaxing, calming evening tea, which can't get enough of, really. And I thought I would do today just a little update of what I've been currently reading. I'll do another one about what I actually finished in January in the future, because it's still some time left in January. But I've had trouble. I've wanted to do a few updates. I wanted to make more videos and cover other things, but I haven't been able to get my thoughts together at all in the past week. Ever since I heard most of you are probably familiar of the channel Jennifer Brooks. I referred to her, Jennifer, Jenny, whatever you'd like to call her. I referred to her a number of times because, we had somewhat similar reading tastes in certain aspects. And just because she was, a great person, had a wonderful channel. And when I found out she had died, I just still can't process it. I still can't seem to get the reality of it. And we weren't like best friends or anything like that, but we were in touch occasionally. And I loved her channel. I liked her a lot. I want to maybe further speak about her in another video because I don't think I have all my thoughts together yet, but it's been a really strange feeling. This isn't the first time someone I've known on BookTube and talked to at some point, in some way has died. It's not, but it's just still extremely shocking. And also I had I'll talk too much about my personal life here, but there was someone in my life the same week that had died as well, and also unexpectedly. And so it's been a little rough, and I'm trying to come up, maybe think about doing some form of comfort reading because that might be best. I already did some comfort reading earlier this month, but I'll talk about that later. But I'm kind of thinking about picking up a Jane Austen again. Maybe it's Pride and Prejudice or something that I know what's going to happen and I know I'll enjoy. But I haven't done that yet. But it feels like it might be something. Nevertheless, I do have that feeling of carrying on, and some things that I enjoy reading just aren't always considered comfort reading, but if I like it, then maybe it's comforting in some way or another. But I went back to Anthony Trollope because he is definitely one of my top favorite authors, and I'm in one of the books that has been. I started this in October, and then petered off a little bit because there were just other books that I was reading, and my reading in 2023 was just a little bit but yeah, so I picked up once again Orley Farm, and most people that I know who have read the entire Orley Farm have nothing but good things to say about it. So I'm continuing in this book, even though it hasn't held me the way I thought it would. I don't dislike it, but I feel like I don't know if I feel like it's dragging on a case, and that was not the exact, but one of the things that I wasn't crazy about, even though I loved the last Chronicle of Barset, Barset, I think it's called, which was his last Barsetshire novel, obviously. It's right behind me. I'm going to turn my back on you, okay? The last Chronicle of Barset, yeah. It has the same thing where there's an issue that might be some kind of legal issue concerning a person, and you're not really sure exactly what's going to happen, but it goes on for the entire novel. And this is quite a thick novel. And so part of me says, okay, can we maybe rush through a little bit of it and not just keep on having people talk about the same thing over and over again? And yet I also feel like maybe it needs to do that. So it's my inner battle between, do I like things to go for a while, because I do like a big chunky book sometimes that just goes on, and then sometimes I just feel a little bit like rushing. I don't know, it's an impatience problem I have as well, the two sides of me warring constantly. But but it picked up again when I was reading it, and I was starting to get really into it. And then there was a scene with fox hunting, and I dislike reading about fox hunting, even though it's not the first time I've come to that point in a Trollope novel. I think Can You Forgive Her had one. But it's not just because I really dislike the sport of fox hunting in terms of I don't like the thought of hunting foxes. I like foxes as animals. I know they can be troublesome, but I don't like the thought of people chasing, for sport. It's just not for me. I also know it was a thing, very much a thing in Victorian times and even later on. Only in recent years has there been more of a crackdown on it as kind of a cruel exercise. But I know that as someone who calls herself an Anglophile, there's not everything about England is something I'm crazy about. I'm not. There is no such thing as the perfect anything. So yeah, so I realized we were getting into that. I was like, oh, I don't really want to read this, but I do realize that it does advance the plot, so it didn't turn me off entirely. So I'm glad I'm keeping on with it. I am enjoying it. I just think that I'm not as thrilled with this book as I thought I was going to be. But maybe I will be proved wrong, and maybe as I continue reading it, I'm going to fall in love with this book. I hope. I'm not in hate with it at all. And now I have 3 history books that I'm currently reading, and all of them are aroundish the same time period or within a 50-year time frame-ish, and thereabouts. But and one of the ones I'm reading digitally, so it's on my Kindle, and that is Philippa Langley's new book about the princes in the tower, and that, of course, reminds me a lot of Jennifer Brooks, because she recently had a vlog where she was discussing that book. She was a big into Richard III, which is one of the things that I used to talk, or used to be as interested, or she may have been more interested, but quite close to as interested as she was. So I didn't get a hold of Philippa Langley's book right away because it was not at my library, and I didn't want to pay full price for a hardcover book, but I found a pretty good deal on the digital version. And I really did think that I wanted to give her a chance to make a case for, even though I saw the documentary in which she calls it This Great Cold Case, where she's basically trying to prove that the Prince in the Tower did not die in the Tower of London, were not killed by Richard III, but that they somehow got out and were possibly the pretenders that Henry VII had to deal with later on. And the documentary did not convince me. It interested me, though. I want to see her side. Apparently the book is only part 1 and there's going to be more. So that's a lot, but I'm going to take my time with that one as well, with this book as well, because it is the kind of book you can take your time with. And I really just started it. Really very similarly in terms of theme, I am reading Henry VII and the Tudor Pretenders, Simnel, Warbeck, and Warwick. Sorry, Warwick. It's not Warwick because it's English. It's Warwick, by Nathan Amin. I always forget how to pronounce his name, even though I've heard it pronounced. He is, I don't want to say he's on the side of Henry VII, but he has done writing about Henry VII and Margaret Beaufort and their families therewith. And I believe that he's actually pretty fair. And I know I didn't go into describing everything that I'm talking about, what I'm talking about with Richard III and everything, because I realized that if you're just watching this video and you've never seen another video of mine, you might be like, what are you talking about? But it's a whole long story that starts basically in the 15th century of in England, wherein a couple of families that were, they were all related, but they were all descended from Edward III, got a little bit of a power struggle between them, and it's called the Wars of the Roses. It wasn't at the time called the Wars of the Roses, I don't think, but so it started to resolve itself when the Yorkist king, Edward IV, was the king, but then there were still continuances of battles back and forth. Things got worse again when Edward IV died, leaving 2 young sons, and his younger brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, took it upon himself to take charge of the new king, have him lodged in the Tower, and then eventually joined by his younger brother, and then basically say that they were illegitimate because their father and his marriage were not well, it wasn't his first marriage, so it was a bigamous situation, so they were illegitimate. So he made himself king, which was a stretch. But then the boys, the princes, one was really a king, but they disappeared. And of course, most people believe that Richard III had culpability, that he had something to do with it. I have not seen proof either way. I do believe that he could have been responsible, and there's whole explanations as to why he would do that. Doesn't make the death of young boys a nice thing to talk about, but I could understand whether or not I agree with it. I could understand if he did it, that he might have been put in a difficult situation and made a choice. However, the reason why it came back to haunt him is because, well, people were not happy with that idea. And so when Henry Tudor was invading England with an army that and ended up besting him, Richard III, a lot of people said, well, it served him right because he usurped the throne, he killed boys, etc. Now, it's up to you to decide how bad Richard III was compared to every other king that did terrible things, because a lot of them did not so great things. But once he was gone, sorry, still kind of hot. Henry VII was the king. Henry Tudor became Henry VII. He was a king, and you would think, okay, everything's fine now. He marries a daughter of Edward IV. Therefore, he has more legitimacy this way. They have kids, they have sons and daughters. Everything's great. The problem is now there were such things that were called pretenders, which basically were Lambert Simnel and Perkin Warbeck. And they were at different intervals claimed to be certain people. Simnel was mostly claimed to be Warwick, who was actually a nephew of Edward IV, the son of George, Duke of Clarence, who was the middle son, and he had been executed for treason, and so that's a whole other story. But when that happened, his children were tainted, I think the word is, which means that they can't inherit from their father. And so there were 2 children. One was, his name wasn't George. I think his name was Edward. Sorry about that. His name was Edward, and he became Warwick because he was, I think was it the Duke or Earl of Warwick? I'm losing my memory today, even though I've just been reading all this. Either way, he was still a kid, and his sister Margaret, who became Margaret Pole later on, who was actually executed as a result of Henry VIII and his issues. So they didn't come to great ends, either of them. But the problem was, okay, so this boy was also put in the Tower later on by Henry VII. I don't think he was treated horribly, at least I hope he wasn't. But the thing is that when people decided to maybe rebel, maybe they weren't crazy about Henry Tudor being the king, and some people were very much close to Richard III, so they or had some other support that they felt for the Yorkist side. The 2 sides of the were Yorkist and York and Lancaster. But anyway, it's a lot. It's a whole history lesson. I do say if you're ever interested to look up the Wars of the Roses, there are a lot of great videos about them. There are a lot of great books about them. There's also good articles. It's an interesting story. But anyway, going back, so this kid Lambert Simnel, they said was actually this Edward Warwick, and he was not. He was launched in the Tower. So and now Philippa Langley, going back to that book, is claiming, I believe, that that was actually the son of Edward IV, the who would have been Edward V. So it's a whole thing, but that resulted in a battle earlier, and they were not successful. Later on, Henry VII had to deal with another pretender, Perkin Warbeck, who claimed to be Richard, Duke of York, the younger of the York boys, who, if his brother had died at this point, would make him the so-called rightful king. And he was accepted by his aunt in Burgundy, and or she was or was it Flanders? But anyway, she was Margaret of York, and she was not a fan of Henry VII either. So I think she just, I know, and there were a lot of people trying to make trouble and trying to maybe they had a disagreement with Henry VII, and so they decided to support this Perkin Warbeck fella, and this person actually stayed around longer and was more of a trouble to Henry VII until much later he was finally executed, and so was Warwick, because I think he might have tried to escape or something, or he was accused of plotting. A whole bunch of things happened, and at that point, Henry VII's son Arthur was getting ready to marry the princess of Spain, Catherine of Aragon, and her parents, Ferdinand and Isabella. A lot of Americans remember that name if they ever were learning anything about Columbus Day. They were like, yeah, we don't want any of these people to be still a threat. And it's said that maybe Henry VII had his, nephew in marriage executed as well, so that he wouldn't be a threat. And some people may say, well, that's, and then that cleared the way for Arthur to marry Catherine, and you see where that went. Now, I don't believe in, things becoming curses or whatever, but I do believe that however you feel about Henry Tudor and Henry VII, that's, when he became king, if you're very much on the side of Richard III and you feel that things were unfair for him, that he was killed that way, well, things weren't so great for Henry VII either. He had to deal with all these problems and was not exactly happy every minute. But I like this book so far. I haven't put it up in a while. I like this book so far because even though Nathan Amin is not, what do you call it, a staunch Ricardian in any way, I don't think he's completely anti Richard III. I think he has a fair way of looking at everybody. And it's really interesting because there's a lot of podcasts and other events in recent years where this Nathan Amin and and Matthew Lewis, who is a Ricardian, who is very pro Richard III, have debates, sometimes with other historians as well. No one really wins the debates. They're friendly. They just keep saying their side, and they'll never completely agree with each other. But it's interesting. It's just, I don't know. I find it interesting. You might not. Anyway, if you have any questions about this, if I haven't made complete sense, let me know in the comments, because I am happy to explain a little more if I can, because I know I'm still not completely coherent about the entire thing. I would love to just put up charts and everything, but I can't. What is on this book? This is not cool, man. There's like a little lint. Okay, it's lint. Okay, I freaked out for a minute there. I picked up a book and I thought there was like a dead bug, and it was actually a bit of lint, because I live in a house full of lint. I have cats and nonsense. Anyway, last but not least, but I only just started this book, really, is a book called, just slightly later, Hunting the Falcon, Henry VIII, the next Henry, Anne Boleyn and the Marriage That Shook Europe, by John Guy, or is it Guy? I think it's John Guy, probably. And Julia Fox. I know the name Julia Fox because I have at least one of her books about Catherine of Aragon. Remember Catherine of Aragon? Just talking about her a few minutes ago. And her sister Juana of Castile or Aragon, was it both? I think Castile. But anyway, she was Catherine's sister. That's a whole other story. Anyway, so this book, and it's a little too glary in here, so I'm not going to hold it up for too long. This book is exactly what it says it is. I am so far in the early phase where it talked a little bit about, Henry VIII and how he got there. So obviously more about Henry VII, and now I'm a little bit into the Boleyn family and where they came from, which I do find interesting. I knew quite a lot about it, but now just a little more background, and I like that. And yes, we know that this is a very well covered subject. Everything about Henry VIII and his wives has been done to death, but I heard this was good, and I would like to see how it shook Europe, because that we hear things about, oh yes, well, Henry, he left Rome and he established the Church of England, even though he was a Catholic at heart, but he was very, he wanted his way, he wanted his divorce or his annulment from Catherine of Aragon. And so this changed everything, because now he wasn't a papist or whatever you want to call it, or technically Catholic country anymore. That's what took England out, etc. Reformation, the monasteries in England. But that's a lot of, it may have affected relations, but it also with other countries, but it mostly affected England. I'm hoping this book gets a little more into how Europe was actually affected. When it says the marriage shook Europe, I really want to see if they actually prove that. Not prove it, but go into detail about how did it shake Europe? Did it really affect day-to-day life? Maybe not day-to-day life, but proceedings in Europe. Were people really affected? So anyway, those are the books that I am currently reading. I think I have a couple more that I am sometimes going into back and forth, and but I think these are enough, and I'm mostly enjoying my reads. I'm just not feeling completely myself yet. I mean, I'm known to have my miserable ups and downs and good days and whatever, but it's been a really tough week or so, and we're gonna do what we can do. And so anyway, let me know in your comments what you think of these books. If you have any thoughts about these books or about this time period, about anything I was talking about today. Thank you for watching. If you are interested in these subjects, please like, subscribe, all the things. And I hope you have a wonderful day. This is Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and book-filled day.